If we want America to stay free, we have to teach our children to keep America free. Sounds obvious, but that's not exactly happening these days. And that's what we're going to talk about today on Bold and Blunt, now on the Edify podcast network as well. So go to Edify and check it out. I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And today we're going to talk critical race theory. We're going to talk about what schools are actually teaching our youth to believe about America. And we're going to talk about why that matters, whether you have children or not, what the children of America are learning. If they're learning to hate America, it won't take long before America is crumbled from within. Again, that's obvious. That's common sense. So stay tuned just for that. And I have a special guest in my second segment who actually is in charge of this new endeavor at PragerU to teach kids the proper ways to go. Train children in the way they should go, and they will not depart from it when they're old. That's a biblical principle. And that's exactly what PragerU is counting on with its new initiative to teach children the proper truths of the history of America. And guess what? America is exceptional, and it still is. Before we get to that, heads up, Washington Times is offering a special deal. If you log on to the website and you like what you see, you like what you read, if you listen into Bold and Blunt podcasts, like what you hear, or listen into the other podcasts that the Washington Times now offers, why not support the Washington Times with a year's subscription to the digital platform, to the digital edition that the Washington Times has to offer? You'll get all this great content, news, analysis, commentaries, podcasts, all that for a year's subscription to the digital platform. And right now, Washington Times is offering a special discounted rate. Just go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl, and you will have a discounted rate on a year's access to the Washington Times digital version. Look, it's money well spent. It gives you the tools you need to fight the far leftists that are taking over this country, that are, as we speak, or in the case of this podcast, as I speak and as you listen, infiltrating the public school systems and jamming the most anti-American rot they can find into your children. Critical race theory, it's an evil. Listen to this. Listen to this to start the show. A set of remarks delivered on the House floor, on the Congressional House floor, by the newly elected Congressman Burgess Owens from Utah's 4th District, 4th Congressional District, a black man who was born into the segregated South. Listen to what he has to say about Democrats and the Democratic ploy to divide and conquer America by race.
When a Democratic president took over, Andrew Johnson. First thing he did is went down and took away the guns of the blacks who were given this property throughout South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. And then they came back and took away their property. The KKK, Democrats. Jim Crow, Democrats. And guess what? The KKK was actually eliminated in 1985. And until Woodrow Wilson, Democratic president, decided to bring it back with Birth of the Nation that he showed in the White House. And a few years later, it was Democrats who burned Wall Street down. Democratic KKK. Slavery was and still is an evil. Whether it's 83 years of history in our nation, or the prior 3,000 years of history, or the presence today around the world. Reparation is divisive. It speaks to the fact that we are a hapless, hopeless race that never did anything but wait for white people to show up and help us.
Isn't that a truth? Isn't that a hard and fast truth? He goes on for a few more minutes, and his remarks, I'll play a few more before I get to the second segment, but his remarks are so dead on. Of course, slavery is an evil, right? He comes out and says it. But What the Democrats do with race is try to divide the country by race so that they can ultimately conquer the country, all races. And then also at the same time crumble the Constitution so they can usher in their own particular tyrannical brand of politics called Marxism, or more to truth, called collectivism. So Democrats hate minorities. Democrats hate specifically black minorities who actually buck the party line of victimhood for blacks. That is one of the key voting principles that Democrats like to bring to black communities, that they are victims of white people specifically, and that it's now the white people who must pay for the sins of the past. And Burgess Owens, Congressman Owens, puts it out there bluntly, boldly and bluntly, as a matter of fact. He bucks that line that says black people are helpless and hapless without their white saviors swooping in to save them from their despondent conditions. And that's something that I always thought as well. The idea that Democrats like to put forward, that blacks without whites to redistribute resources and take from one group and give to another, specifically to blacks, that without that redistributing of wealth and resources, that blacks can't survive. Isn't that basically saying that blacks are inferior humans? That's got to be patronizing, condescending if you're a black person. But the Democrat Party successfully sells that as if it's a truth. And you know, in this country, let's make it clear, this country has had some black marks in its history. Every country does. Every country has stories of conquest and wins on one side, but if you ask the conquered, then they look at that as grievance and suffering. So history, of course, depends on who's telling the history. But the fact is, in this country, go through its history and you will see that by and large, the spirit of freedom, the principles of liberty, morphed as they have through the years from founding to present day, are still the best the world has to offer, no matter your skin color, no matter your gender, no matter your situation in life, no matter whether you were born into wealth versus poverty, no matter even your handicap, physical or mental, no matter any circumstance that rightly could be used by some as a stumbling block to success, no matter what those stumbling blocks are here in this country, in America, you're free still to pursue your wildest dreams. And in many cases, they come true. Just ask Congressman Owens.
We have a history of millions of middle class and wealthy black Americans throughout our 20th century who achieved their dreams. Instead of a theory, I'd like to share the reality of a race whose history of success in America has been stolen, and what we can do to repay that damage. I grew up in the Deep South, Tallahassee, in the 50s and 60s, where we believed in commanding respect, not begging or asking for it. We did that by meritocracy, by winning. Not just in sports and entertainment, but in every discipline: math, science, exploration, innovation, farming, enterprise. We had a reputation, as the Asian community today has a reputation of winning respect. That was the black community back in the 60s.
What happened? What happened to that, right? How do you get from a reputation for demanding and achieving success to just in a few short years, just in a few decades, a reputation of, according to the Democrat Party anyhow, of requiring the assistance of others, specifically of white people, of politicians, of government, to provide for you? How do you get from there to there? How do you go from A to B in such a short period of time? Well, you let the Democrats deceive you, for one. You let the Democrats deceive you. That's one of the biggest reasons for downfall, not just with the black community, but with any community that allows Democrats to control. Back to the congressman.
I remember Perkins Service Station, Speed Grocery Store, Baker's Pharmacy, FAMU Hospital, where only black doctors and nurses worked. We were taught about pride in our country, pride in our race. We were taught about Christus Addis, the first American martyr who died in the Revolutionary War, the Tuskegee Airmen, and over 100,000 black men who fought the wars against the godless ideology of Marxism and socialism and communism. Those same ideologies now thriving in our educational institutions. We were taught to recognize and appreciate progress. Said 1973, entered the NFL, no black quarterbacks, middle linebackers, free safety, because those are white thinking positions. 40 years later, we're now electing a president of the United States as a black man.
You know what? He brings up a good point. Taught to recognize progress and to look with hope on progress instead of playing the victimhood card. Right? No black quarterbacks to black quarterbacks. No black quarterbacks to a black president of the United States. Any group in America could look with victimhood on the past grievances that they've suffered. That's not to downgrade what blacks suffered in this country in terms of slavery. That's not to take that away. That's not to say that one is the same level of grievance as another. But it is to say that at a certain point in time, an individual, a community, a country has to move past the darkness and agree in a unified manner to enter the light. And it's in that theme that America works for everybody. It's the unifying theme of freedom, pursuit of freedom, rights coming from the Creator, not from government, individualism. It's those principles that are unifying. That's not to say America's perfect, and it's not to say that just because America does offer the pursuit of freedom and success and dreams, that there won't be stumbling blocks in individuals' ways, that there won't even be certain elements of racism that hold some in society from progressing as quickly as they otherwise should be able to. We can't deny that racism exists to this day, but we can't pretend as if America's foundations are rooted in racism and that root of racism is still to this day holding back blacks and minorities in society. That's just not true. Everybody struggles to achieve dreams. And I just want to, before we get to my guest, I just want to leave you with this one principle. Isn't it the struggle that makes the achievement so great? If it came easy, where's the value in that? The greatness in an individual can be defined in one way by the level of struggle he or she had to overcome to achieve. That's what humans respect. That's what motivates humans. That's what inspires. Really, if you want to get down to the root of it, that's what glorifies God in the end. I like Congressman Owens because he carries a great message. And what I like about his message is it's not a message for black people. It's a message for Americans. It's a message that unifies, not divides, and it's a message that inspires. We can learn a lot. We can learn a lot by coming together on a message of American exceptionalism. But far too many times these days in the public school systems, unions, teachers, staffers, administrators, they're not all guilty. There are plenty out there who who are in the school systems in America's public schools and decry what's taking place, but by and large, too many are pushing forward an anti-American message. And that just leads to destruction for America. My guest today is Jill Simonian. She is the director of PragerU Kids, which is this new initiative at Prager University to teach kids truthful histories of America. And it's being offered now for free on the PragerU website, not just for individuals, not just for parents, but for teachers and administrators and school officials who may be looking for ways to counteract the anti-Americanism that is being force-fed into our children's minds too many times these days in America's public schools. So, Jill, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
So I love what I'm hearing about this new PragerU initiative to train kids in the way they should go instead of filling their minds with the public school propaganda. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I love the way you say train kids the way they should go, because I know that's from the Bible. I'm a Sunday school teacher. It's one of my side jobs.
It is.
But PragerU Kids is a few months old, and for years, PragerU fans have been asking, when are you guys starting to, when will you start to produce children's content, videos that celebrate American values for kids so that they can learn about freedom and equality under God and responsibility and all that stuff. So we've finally done it. We're very excited. If you go to PragerU.com/kids, you can see, I think it is now up to 8 or 9 different content lines of videos and digital magazines for kids kindergarten through 12th grade, teaching them and celebrating with them all the things that the public schools are leaving out these days.
So how do you mean these to be used? Do you mean them to be used by parents at home trying to counter some of the statements and teachings of the public school, or do you mean them to be used by teachers right now in the public school systems?
All of the above. All of the above. Of course, our audience is there are a lot of homeschool parents in our audience, of course, and we definitely are offering different types of resources to them to be able to include in their curriculum. A lot of our videos showcase history. We have an animated cartoon called Leo and Layla. This brother and sister travel back in time and meet historical heroes like Ronald Reagan, Paul Revere. They learn a little bit about history. So we have videos like that. We have digital magazines that talk about different geopolitical issues, important ideas, historical heroes that, again, are neglected in school, Abigail Adams, Margaret Thatcher. So we have those types of resources for homeschool parents, but also we also created this for parents and families who are in public schools and private schools who really want to supplement and take charge at home in teaching their kids, listen, you might not be learning about this in school, but in our family, in our community, in our country, this is what we value, and this is the history that we celebrate and we should all learn about. So we created this resource for them, and on top of it, for teachers as well, because in our membership group now, we have a membership group called PrEP, and there's about 15,000 members in just a few short months that are PrEP members to support our PragerU Kids content, and 20% of them are teachers. And so what we're finding through our discussion forum with our PrEP membership group is that teachers are writing to me and saying, hey, I'm using this digital magazine as part of my 5th grade history curriculum, or I'm including this video series. We have this new video series called TBH, To Be Honest History, and the first one's on the scientific revolution. There's teachers that are saying, hey, I'm including this in my world history unit this year. So it really is for everyone.
I am on the page, the TBH page that you were just referencing, and this is at PragerU.com. You can find the pages on that site. But what I wanted to just ask you, you just referenced the scientific revolution. What is it in the public school systems that teaches faulty or skewed or outright inaccurate history about Galileo and Newton and Copernicus, for example?
The best answer I can give you is something that sums up what's happening in our schools in a nutshell, and that's the implementation and obsession with critical race theory.
Right.
And I know that I'm sure your audience has heard all about critical race theory, and we know that critical race theory, critical race theory teaches everything through a lens of race. And so what we've seen happen is that many classic studies, classic books, classic literature, classic lessons about history are being, I want to say like the headlines of history that everyone should have a shared knowledge of. All of those classic foundational history lessons, literature lessons, they're all being put into the footnotes because the fallback is, well, those are all white men, and we need to include diverse lessons in our history, which, we're not trying to get away from diversity, but at the same time, there are classic history lessons that every single person, especially in America, should be educated on. And Galileo, Copernicus, and the scientific revolution, that falls into one of the categories of, many of these woke educators now are saying, well, we want to steer away from teaching things like that because those are all white men and it marginalizes everyone else, and we don't need to focus on them because they're white, and white supremacy is a direct threat to our school system. So that's what's happening in a broad sense in schools. And so it's really unfortunate because we have a whole generation of kids who are not learning the foundational history to build upon, to then expand upon and learn about the diverse figures that of course are important parts of our history as well.
If you already have this among your categories, forgive me because I just haven't seen it yet, but are you going to go out of your way to include histories of blacks and minorities in America and the contributions that truthfully they made? I guess to give a complete history, but also to put to rest the naysayers who want to say that, PragerU is just bolstering white man's history again in America.
Of course, absolutely. Something that I think, it's not launched yet, but I know we have a show coming out about Frederick Douglass. We have an entire new content line that's being created called The Scoop. I think that's an unofficial title. I probably shouldn't have said that on air right now, but we have a new content line coming out that is focused on varied it's sort of like a current events newsletter for kids, and we are going to be highlighting a lot of the untold stories, particularly stories of, I'm just thinking of an example that's been discussed. A story that's been discussed has been how black soldiers were paramount to the American Revolution, and there's countless stories, and we all know that there's countless stories. So yeah, we definitely, of course, that's one of our goals, is to really tell the full historical spectrum, so that we can all learn about how America was created and why our freedoms are so important.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because things have gotten so divisive now in America over race that it just seems difficult to look at America's history through the lens of truth and talk about contributions from all types of Americans, men and women both, because you're immediately, it seems, put in a box of bolstering one facet of society over another.
It's absolutely true, and that is what is so disturbing. And I have I'm a mom. I have two elementary school children. I want that. I'm not raising them in a fairy tale land that, America is just, America has no faults and we've never had any issues and there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
America has a very difficult and complex past, and we all know that, and we all recognize it. And I want my kids to learn that. However, what I don't want to happen through their education, and I know countless, parents and teachers and grandparents share this sentiment with me, what I don't want to happen is I don't want their education hijacked by a lens of race.
Right.
I want them to be taught what has happened in history, but I don't want it through a lens of, you need to feel guilty about this. You need to apologize for this. You need to see someone's color before you recognize them as a human being. I don't want any of that, because where does that leave us as a country? Our country will be gone. Our education system will be gone.
Absolutely. When I was looking over the website this morning, my mind was kind of wandering to what's going on right now in Afghanistan. And it's just interesting to me that here you are at PragerU trying to teach truthful history, right? Launching this all-important campaign. And we have going on right now in this White House and within the Democrat Party a failure to recognize the history of the devastations and terrorist-type tendencies of the Taliban. And it just shows, it underscores how very important truthful history is.
It does. And I'll tell you something at the forefront, just piggybacking on what you said, to take it in a further direction, something that is at the forefront of my mind now is September 11th. I mean, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and this past year alone, I, as a mom, have seen and experienced firsthand how so many of our schools are shying away from teaching children what happened on that day 20 years ago. And that, to me, it's the same thing. I mean, just as you said with Afghanistan and not learning the history, that to me is so scary, because, we never want to frighten children, and you always want to teach things in a delicate and age-appropriate way, and it's a very, very hard conversation to have with kids when it comes to very frightening things like this that we're experiencing now. But we have to teach our children and have these conversations, because if they don't know our history, we are in so much trouble far beyond what any of us can imagine for the future of this country. And, that's one thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to open the conversation and provide resources so that parents and teachers have an inroad to be able to bring up some of these difficult topics. In a few weeks, we have our, I don't know if you saw it on the website now, but in a few weeks, we have our Otto's Tales, today is September 11th, children's book launching. And once a month, we've started debuting children's books for kindergarten through second graders once a month that coincide with a commemorative day in America, whether it be a holiday or a day like September 11th. And these are hard copy books that parents can use to open conversations with our children so that they can begin to learn the history that is so important.
I find that devastating that public schools are shying away from teaching the truths of September 11th. And I agree with you that children need to be taught in age-appropriate manners, but it's actually the tough topics that lead to more critical thinking, which is in dire straits in this country right now. And we can see that from the year and a half of the coronavirus and the continued clampdowns. I like the idea that what you're teaching is also, you're training kids to critically think and question and answer among themselves these hard questions about America's histories.
Yeah, we are. And I got to tell you, too, speaking of critical thinking, which is, that has been the theme personally at my household this last year. And I laugh, but it's very, very serious. It's been a very focused theme at my house, critical thinking. But that is one of the foundational values that we are trying to continue. through PragerU Kids. We want to teach kids how to think. We want, a lot of schools are teaching kids what to think, and they're doing it in a very, I hate to use the word bullying way, but when you look at it from the outside, it is a sort of soft bullying. If you don't think this way, you're wrong. If you don't assert that there are more than two genders, you're wrong and your parents are wrong. If you don't assert that the group is more important than an individual right, you are wrong. You are dangerous. This is, this is not hyperbole. There was a time when I thought everything I was saying was hyperbole. But this last year opened my eyes as a parent. I am very involved in, my local schools, and this is not hyperbole anymore. This really is happening, and parents need to stay alert. Grandparents need to stay alert. Teachers need to stay brave. It's, our heart goes out to teachers, but there are thousands of amazing teachers out there who know that what is happening, much of what is happening is so wrong. And what we're trying to do at PragerU Kids in our prep membership group is to create a support system and a way for everyone to be able to tap into their courage and to speak up and to hold school boards and compromised education systems accountable and say, this is not right and we're not going to stand for this anymore, and this is how we need to rectify things.
It's funny you tread softly about using the word bullying, but I find that basically selling it softly. I look at it more as tyrannical, how the school systems are treating parents and students who want to buck the status quo. And look, this whole notion of critical thinking, it's the issue of the day because it raises the fight of individualism versus collectivism. And that's what we're fighting in school systems right now. And just to get to the last question here, when you look at the pushback that's going on in the nation now among some parents against school systems, do you take that as a show of optimism that parents are awakening to the dire situation to turn to alternative outlets like PragerU to educate their kids?
I do look at it as a positive thing, and that's very hard for me to say because I got to tell you, my sister is a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher. I have always been, as a woman, a person, I have always been the rule follower, the supporter of education. I have always been the one, quote unquote, on the teachers and administrators' sides. But I am finding myself in a position now where I'm actually grieving what has happened to our system. But this is what has to happen right now, and it is positive that we are standing up and having the fiery speeches at the school board meeting. I mean, if you would have told me a year ago that I was going to be attending every single one of my school board meetings with prepared, very, point blank, blunt, fiery speeches, trying to get answers to questions that are so egregiously wrong, they're happening in my district. If you would have told me that I would have been doing that as a parent, I would have laughed in your face, told you were insane. But lo and behold, I'm doing it. And to see thousands of parents standing up, I am so optimistic that the awakening has happened and we can course correct. I'm not going to say, I don't know if we're going to win this battle fully. But what we can do is do what we can to miss the iceberg, so to speak, so that we don't go plowing straight into this iceberg, but we got to redirect so that we miss the iceberg so that we can, continue to course correct the wrongs that are happening and put a message of, listen, you're not going to do this to us anymore. These are our children. These are our schools. This is our country.
Yep, I'm with you, Jill. Look, but both my parents were teachers, so I had the same coming to awakening realization that the schools of today are not the same as they were when even my parents were teaching just a few years ago. So it is the great awakening out there, and I see it as optimistic as well. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing at PragerU and give you this chance to just let people know how they can get a hold of the materials that you guys are offering.
Thank you so much. Yeah, everything we're producing and developing for kids is free. All of our PragerU videos are free, for that matter. I should say that. But if you go to PragerU.com/kids, you will find us. You will find our shows for kindergarten through 12th grade. There's videos, there's digital magazines. We encourage you to subscribe and also become a member of our PrEP membership program. There's a robust discussion group that is gifted with that membership that really aims to solve problems with a network of parents and teachers who are like-minded and on this mission together. So come find us. We're happy to share everything with you and really move forward to correcting the path that we're on.
Great. Jill Simonian, thank you so much for coming on Bold and Blunt. Thanks for the info.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another Bold and Blunt podcast. Thank you for listening. And if you like what you hear, why not subscribe to Bold and Blunt, the Bold and Blunt podcast? Get it sent to your email box every Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe to my newsletter at the Washington Times. Just go to WashingtonTimes.com, find my name, click on the hyperlink, and scroll down to the bottom, and you will see easy peasy directions on how to sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter, where you will get all the commentaries I write for the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. And here's a news flash for you. You can also find Bold and Blunt now on the Edify app. Go to Edify, and that is EDIFI.app, APP, right? And search for Bold and Blunt. Or go to Edify online, find it on Apple and Google Play and so forth, and sign up. These are all podcasts at Edify that will help inspire you and motivate you in your faith and to fight for America, to fight for individual God-given liberties. That's the key. That's the key right there. Individual liberties that come from God, not government. As always, thanks for listening. Tune in next time. And don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.